In the heart of the celestial draconian empire, where towers of crystal and steel scraped the sky and fleets of starships glided silently through orbit, the Dragon Emperor's son lived in silence. Prince Kael'thir, heir to the throne, had never walked. He had never flown. And he had never felt the fire that surged naturally through the veins of every dragon in his lineage. From the moment of his birth, he had been confined to a special chamber in the Sky Palace, attended by tutors, caretakers, and healers who tried in vain to awaken his body. They labeled him fragile, broken, and unworthy of the title he was destined to inherit. Yet Kael'thir was not fragile in the way they imagined. His scales were strong and unblemished, his claws sharp and ready, and his wings, though folded, were beautifully formed. It was not weakness that plagued him, it was restraint, a subtle block in his body that no draconian had ever learned to remove. He spent his days watching the world through the tall windows of his chamber. Outside, the palace courtyard stretched like a garden of light, filled with dragons practicing flight, sparring, and playing games that displayed both power and elegance. He longed to join them, yet each time he attempted even a simple movement, pain and frustration held him back. "Another day, Kael'thir!" The Emperor's voice boomed from the palace hall, though he rarely visited. "Another day in which you fail to rise. Your tutors report no progress. You must understand. You are a dragon of this empire. One cannot be heir while remaining stagnant." The prince lowered his eyes, the familiar sting of shame pressing against his heart. He had heard these words countless times, yet each repetition made the walls of his chamber feel tighter. He did not respond. There was nothing he could say that would change the reality of his body. Then, one quiet morning, a new presence arrived in the palace. The Emperor had acquired a human servant from a recently contacted planet. Humans were known across the Empire as small, fragile, and inferior. They were clever and adaptable, but they lacked the raw power of even the youngest dragonlings. This human, named Arya Hale, entered the Sky Palace carrying a simple satchel and a calm, steady demeanor. The palace staff whispered as she passed. They doubted her abilities, mocked her small frame, and questioned why the Emperor had sent someone so seemingly inconsequential to serve the Dragon Prince. Arya did not respond to their stares. She walked directly into Kael'thir's chamber, bowed politely, and said, "I am here to serve you, Your Highness." The prince raised his head in surprise. No one had ever greeted him like this before. Most people treated him like a fragile ornament to be looked at, not a person to be addressed. There was a spark of curiosity in his amber eyes as he studied her. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her hair was dark and pulled back simply, her uniform plain but clean, and her eyes, a striking shade of green, seemed to observe everything with quiet attention. Days passed, and Arya settled into her role. She brought meals, assisted with grooming, and organized the prince's quarters with efficiency. But she also watched him, not with pity or fear, but with interest. She noted the subtle twitch of his claws, the slight tension in his wings, the way his tail moved in response to sounds. Most importantly, she noticed that his body was not broken, it was merely trapped. One afternoon, while helping him adjust a cushion beneath his back, Arya spoke softly. "Your muscles are strong, Kael'thir. Your body wants to move, I can see it. But something holds it back." The prince blinked. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. He had heard hundreds of healers, masters, and even his own father declare him deficient, broken, or hopeless. But this human, she was different. "I do not understand," he admitted. "Every healer has failed me. Every teacher has tried and failed. Why would you succeed where they could not?" Arya smiled faintly. "I am not going to force your body. I am going to teach it. Sometimes power is not brute strength. Sometimes it is patience, balance, and guidance. Your body is not broken, Cael'thir. It is sleeping, and I know how to wake it. Over the next several days, Arya introduced him to small exercises, simple stretches, breathing routines, and movements that required coordination more than force. At first, Cael'thir struggled. His wings barely responded. His legs trembled at the thought of standing, and even lifting his tail required more concentration than he imagined possible. But Arya was patient, encouraging him with each success. "You are doing this," she said one day, placing her hand gently on his claw. "Not me. I am only showing you the path." The prince felt something he had never felt before: hope. It was fragile and tentative, but it was there. And hope was a dangerous thing in the Sky Palace. It had the power to awaken dreams that had been buried for years. News of Cael'thir's minor movements spread quietly among the palace staff. Some whispered that the human maid was doing the impossible. Others accused her of interfering with the prince. Arya ignored the gossip, focusing entirely on Cael'thir. She introduced him to tools from her home planet, strange devices that vibrated at certain frequencies, helping him feel the subtle energies flowing through his body. One evening, after a particularly long session, the prince managed to lift one claw from the floor without assistance. He froze in disbelief, staring at his own movement. I did it," he whispered, barely daring to breathe. "Yes," Arya said, smiling softly, "and soon you will do more." But not everyone in the palace was pleased. The emperor received reports of Cael'thir's progress and summoned Arya to explain herself. Standing in the grand hall, beneath banners that depicted dragons in majestic flight, she faced the emperor with courage. "Your Majesty," she said, "I am not harming the prince. I am helping him find his own strength. The body he was born with is capable. It simply needs guidance." The emperor studied her closely. Dragons were suspicious of humans, and no human had ever dared to speak so boldly within the palace walls. Yet there was something in her eyes, something honest, patient, and unwavering. "Very well," he said finally. "You may continue. But know this: if you give him false hope, human, not even your stars will hide you." Arya bowed. "I understand, Your Majesty. But this is no false hope. Cael'thir has always had the strength. I only show him how to find it." Returning to Cael'thir's chamber, Arya found the prince staring out the window, the sun reflecting off the palace towers. "Do you really think I can walk? Fly?" he asked quietly. Arya knelt beside him, placing a hand over his. "I know you can. Not because you are a dragon, not because of your bloodline, but because you are willing to try. Strength comes from within, Cael'thir, and sometimes the smallest creatures, like humans, can show the greatest dragons how to rise." That night, for the first time in his life, Cael'thir slept without dread. He dreamed of wings unfurling, of claws gripping the sky, of a human beside him guiding every step. He did not know how far he could go. He did not know if he would ever truly fly. But for the first time, he believed it was possible. The Sky Palace, vast and silent, seemed to breathe with him that night. Somewhere deep within its towers, the whisper of destiny moved, waiting for the moment when the prince would rise. And Arya, a human among dragons, continued her work, patient, determined, and quietly defying an empire that had once deemed the impossible unattainable. And so the first step toward a miracle began, not with fire, not with strength, but with trust, patience, and the courage to believe that even the most impossible dreams could take flight. The next morning, the first rays of the twin suns spilled across the Sky Palace, bathing its crystal towers in golden light. Cael'thir woke with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The dreams of the previous night clung to him like a delicate mist, and for the first time, he felt a small flicker of excitement instead of fear. Arya had already begun her preparations for the day. She arranged small mats on the polished floor, placed lightweight devices that hummed softly in the corner, and positioned a few low-gravity plates near the windows. Cael'thir watched silently, unsure if he was ready for what was to come. "You do not have to do everything at once," Arya said gently, noticing his hesitation. "Strength is built slowly. One movement, one breath at a time. Today, we begin with balance." The prince nodded, trying to ignore the nervous tension in his wings. He had never stood on his own before. Even sitting up for more than a few moments caused pain and exhaustion. Arya moved beside him and adjusted his posture with careful hands, guiding his spine, shoulders, and wings into alignment. "Feel your center," she instructed softly. "Not your wings, not your claws, just your center. It is the foundation of every step, every flight." Cael'thir closed his eyes and took a slow breath. He could feel the vibration of the palace beneath him, the faint pulse of energy that coursed through every dragon's body. It was weak at first, but it was there. He tried to shift his weight slightly to feel the balance in his legs and tail. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, his left claw lifted from the mat. Arya's eyes brightened. "Good. Very good. Now put it down slowly and lift the other." The prince obeyed, amazed by the simple motion. He could feel it, movement without pain, control without strain. It was as if a long frozen river inside him had begun to flow again. The morning passed in slow, steady exercises. Cael'thir learned to sway gently, to shift his weight from one leg to the other, to coordinate the subtle motions of his tail. Arya introduced him to small tools from her homeworld, soft bands that wrapped around his legs and wings, vibrating gently to stimulate muscles and nerves. At first, the vibrations made him flinch, but Arya guided him through the discomfort. "You see," she said, "your body responds to what it needs, not what it is told. Patience will awaken it. Force will only break it." By mid-afternoon, Cael'thir could balance on one claw for a full minute. The achievement filled him with an unfamiliar warmth of pride. He glanced at Arya, who smiled knowingly. "You are stronger than you think. Your body just needed to remember how." That evening, during a brief rest, Cael'thir ventured a question he had long avoided. "Do you think I will ever walk? Fly?" Arya considered the question carefully. "I do not know how far you can go, Cael'thir, but I know this. You will go further than anyone believes possible, not because you are a dragon, but because you are willing to try. That is the greatest strength of all." Over the following weeks, their routine became more intense. Arya introduced new exercises each day, stretching the wings, controlled resistance movements, and micro-jumps using the low-gravity plates. Every small success was celebrated, and every failure was analyzed and learned from. Cael'thir discovered something extraordinary about the human maid. She understood his body better than anyone else, even the palace healers who had studied him for years. She could sense the tension before it caused pain, adjust his position before it became dangerous, and encourage him when doubt clouded his mind. One morning, after weeks of training, Cael'thir attempted something new. He planted both claws firmly on the ground and tried to lift his legs simultaneously. His wings stretched instinctively, trembling with the effort. For a few glorious seconds, he hovered just above the mat, unsteady but airborne. He collapsed after the effort, gasping, but his eyes shone with triumph. "You did it!" Arya exclaimed, rushing to his side. "Do you feel it? That is what you are capable of. That is your strength waking up." The palace staff began to notice subtle changes. Servants who once treated him with pity now whispered in awe. Even some tutors could not hide their surprise. But not all were pleased. Some dragons viewed his progress with suspicion and fear. They whispered that the human maid had cast a spell or used trickery to alter the prince's nature. One afternoon, an elder dragon named Varion, a respected advisor to the emperor, entered Caelthyr's chamber. His golden scales gleamed in the sunlight, and his wings were massive and intimidating. "Prince Caelthyr," he said, his voice stern, "reports say you are moving, that a human has interfered with your training. Explain yourself." Caelthyr felt a mix of pride and fear. "It is not interference, Master Varion. Arya is helping me to find myself. My body is capable. I just did not know how to wake it." Varion studied him closely. Caelthyr held his gaze, unflinching. It was the first time he had ever stood his ground against a senior dragon without trembling. The elder's eyes narrowed, then softened slightly. "Perhaps we underestimated you," he admitted. "But tread carefully. The palace does not forgive mistakes lightly." Days later, the emperor himself visited Caelthyr's chamber. His presence filled the room with weight and authority. Caelthyr stood, careful but determined. He could not yet walk, but he had learned to balance, to coordinate, to move with intention. "Caelthyr," the emperor said, his voice deep and resonant, "I hear rumors that a human has taught you to move, that you have made progress where all others have failed. Speak the truth." Caelthyr looked at Arya, who nodded slightly, giving him courage. "It is true, father," he said. "Arya has helped me find my strength. I am not broken. I can move. I can learn to fly. I only need guidance." The emperor was silent for a long moment. His gaze shifted between the human maid and his son. Finally, he spoke. "Very well. You may continue. But know this, if you give him false hope, human, not even your stars will hide you." Arya bowed. "I understand, your majesty, but I promise this is no false hope. Caelthyr has the strength. I only guide him." In the days that followed, Caelthyr's training intensified. Arya introduced him to new techniques, controlled breathing that synchronized with his internal energy, micro-activations of his wings that strengthened muscles, and exercises that tested his balance in 3 dimensions. The human tools she used, designed for small and fragile humans, worked surprisingly well on him. They activated dormant muscles and nerves that no draconian had ever reached. Caelthyr's progress was slow but undeniable. He learned to lift his legs in small hops, to coordinate his tail for balance, and to extend his wings slightly. Each step, each flutter of his wings, was a victory that filled him with joy he had never known. The palace began to notice more than just his physical changes. Caelthyr's confidence grew. He spoke with more assurance, moved with more intent, and even smiled at Arya when he achieved a particularly difficult motion. The small victories transformed his spirit. One evening, after a particularly long session, Caelthyr sat on the mat, exhausted but exhilarated. "Do you think I will ever fly properly?" he asked softly. Arya smiled and placed her hand over his. "I do not know how far you can go, Caelthyr, but I know this. The first step is believing you can. Flight comes after, when your body and mind are ready. Today you have taken that first step." For the first time, Caelthyr felt that his life was not defined by limitation or shame. He had begun a journey that no one in the Empire had believed possible, guided by a human who refused to see him as weak. He realized that strength was not just the power of claws or wings, it was determination, courage, and trust. And so, under the twin suns that set the towers of the Sky Palace aglow, Caelthyr trained tirelessly with Arya. Every movement, every stretch, every flutter of a wing brought him closer to a future no one had imagined. He did not yet walk. He did not yet fly. but he had taken the first steps toward what the Draconians believed impossible. The first chapter of his transformation was complete. The boy who had never walked, who had never flown, was beginning to awaken. And the human who had defied expectation was proving that the smallest creatures could achieve the greatest miracles. The weeks that followed were unlike any Cael'thir had ever experienced. Each day he rose earlier than before, anticipating the training with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. The Sky Palace, once a place of isolation and shame, had transformed into a space of possibility. Every room, every mat, every device Arya placed in the chamber became a tool for discovery and hope. Arya had introduced a new exercise that morning, a delicate balance routine combined with controlled energy pulses from her devices. She explained that this would help Cael'thir connect not just his muscles, but the latent energy flame within him, the mysterious fire that every dragon could ignite, but he could not. "Today, we focus on sensing," she said gently, "not forcing. Your flame is there, Cael'thir. You only need to listen." The prince lowered his head, concentrating. The device hummed softly, emitting a frequency he could barely hear, but somehow feel. At first, nothing happened. His wings twitched slightly, then stilled. He frowned, frustration rising. "Patience," Arya reminded him. "The flame is like a sleeping river. You cannot rush it. You can only guide it." Minutes passed. Cael'thir shifted his weight, flexing his claws and tail in a slow, controlled rhythm. Then, faintly, he felt a warmth deep inside him, a subtle vibration that responded to his breath. His amber eyes widened. I feel it," he whispered. "Yes," Arya encouraged, her voice soft but firm. "Good. Keep focusing. Let it grow naturally." For hours, they worked together. The prince practiced controlled movements, lifted his legs in small jumps, and stretched his wings to the maximum his body allowed. The faint warmth of the flame pulsed, stronger with each coordinated effort. Arya adjusted her devices and position constantly, ensuring that Cael'thir's energy flowed safely and efficiently. By afternoon, he had achieved something remarkable. He lifted both legs and, with a careful push from his wings, hovered a few inches above the mat. His balance was tenuous, but he had moved higher than ever before. He looked at Arya, a mixture of awe and disbelief in his expression. "You see? You are capable," she said, smiling. "Your body and your flame are waking up together. Each step brings you closer to what you were meant to do." Word of Cael'thir's progress began to spread further in the palace. Some dragons whispered in admiration, others murmured suspicion. A few of the older, more traditional dragons began questioning the Emperor's decision to allow a human to train the prince. Arya paid no attention to the gossip, focusing entirely on Cael'thir. One evening, during a routine check of his posture and energy, Arya paused. "Cael'thir, there is something I have been considering. Your flame is locked by a rare neural pattern, unique, almost impossible to unlock by draconian methods alone. But humans have a subtle way to influence it." The prince tilted his head. "How? Humans do not have flame." "No," Arya said gently, "but humans have sound and vibration. The frequencies we produce can harmonize with your internal energy. It may help awaken the flame fully, if we try carefully." Cael'thir hesitated. The thought of attempting something so dangerous filled him with fear. One misstep could leave him weaker than before. But he looked at Arya, the human who had never doubted him, and nodded. "I trust you." The next morning they prepared for the ritual. Arya brought a small device from Earth, unfamiliar to anyone in the palace, capable of emitting harmonic frequencies, tuned precisely to Cael'thir's energy. She explained each step as she set the device near him. "Lie down gently," she instructed. "Relax. Let your body respond naturally. I will guide the frequency. You only need to focus on your breath and your energy." Kael'thir obeyed, closing his eyes and breathing slowly. Arya activated the device, and a soft, resonant hum filled the room. It was a sound unlike any he had heard, a vibration that seemed to move through the air, the floor, and into his very being. His body shivered as the energy traveled through him. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Kael'thir's wings twitched, his tail moved slightly, and his claws flexed. Then, a sudden warmth spread from his chest to his wings, his legs, and his tail. A faint glow appeared beneath his scales, soft at first, then gradually brighter. Arya's voice was calm and steady. "Good, Kael'thir. Keep breathing. Focus. Let the energy flow through every part of you." The glow intensified. Kael'thir opened his eyes and gasped. His body felt alive in a way he had never experienced. For the first time, he could feel the flame not as a distant potential, but as a part of him, responding to his will. He stretched his wings tentatively, and they extended fully, shimmering with a gentle light. Then, he lifted slightly off the ground. Just a few inches, but it was flight, however small. The exhilaration overwhelmed him. He hovered for a moment, balancing on his own strength, and landed softly on the mat. Arya's eyes shone with pride. "Do you feel it? This is only the beginning. Your flame is awake. Your wings are ready. You are learning to fly." Kael'thir laughed, a sound of pure joy that had been absent from the palace for years. I never thought this was possible." "You never needed to think it was possible," Arya said gently. "You only needed to try." The palace reacted quickly to these developments. Couriers whispered to the Emperor, and some elder dragons came to observe the progress. Many were astonished at the humans' success in guiding the prince. Some grudgingly admitted that Arya's methods were effective. Others could not accept it, claiming that humans had no right to interfere with the destiny of dragons. One day, Varian, the elder advisor, returned. He watched Kael'thir hover a foot above the mat, wings fully extended, flame glowing softly around him. He nodded slowly. "Remarkable," he said. "It seems you have found a way to awaken what was thought lost. Perhaps humans are not entirely useless." Kael'thir beamed, though he remained focused on the exercise. Every successful lift, every controlled flutter of wings strengthened his confidence. He was learning that his body, once restrained, could respond to guidance, trust, and perseverance. As the days passed, Arya introduced him to more complex maneuvers. Micro-jumps became short glides, and glides became hovering in place. His flame grew brighter, responding to his focus and intent. His tail became an active stabilizer rather than a passive limb, and his claws learned to grip and release with precision. But these successes did not go unnoticed by others in the Empire. A rival faction of dragons, jealous and fearful of the prince's rapid rise, began plotting. They viewed his newfound abilities, and the human who guided him, as a threat to their influence. Whispers of sabotage and conspiracy spread through the corridors of the palace. One evening, Kael'thir and Arya were practicing near the windows overlooking the city. The twin suns were setting, casting long shadows across the towers. Suddenly a commotion erupted outside, shouts, the sound of wings beating furiously, and a sense of danger that made the prince's heart pound. "They are coming," Arya said calmly, though her eyes were sharp. "A faction of dragons does not wish to see you rise, but we can face them." Kael'thir's wings trembled, but the flame in his chest burned brighter. He had never fought before, never defended himself or anyone else. But with Arya by his side, he felt capable. I am ready," he said. The attackers arrived, sleek, powerful dragons who believed in strength through fear and tradition. They underestimated Kael'thir, assuming he would falter, and they dismissed Arya as a powerless human. But the prince had learned something far more potent than raw power. He had learned control, focus, and the courage to defy expectation. He lifted off the ground, hovering just out of reach, and spread his wings fully. The soft glow of his flame illuminated the chamber, dazzling the attackers. Arya moved quickly, using her knowledge of the palace layout to position the prince strategically. With careful, precise movements, Kael'thir dodged, hovered, and used his flame in controlled bursts to disarm the intruders. None were harmed, but they were forced to retreat in confusion and fear. For the first time, the prince had defended himself, and he had done so without reckless violence. When the danger had passed, Kael'thir landed, breathless but triumphant. He looked at Arya, who smiled, proud but composed. "See? You are stronger than you imagined, not because of raw strength, but because of determination, courage, and the willingness to rise." The palace now viewed the prince differently. He was no longer just the Dragon Emperor's son who could not walk or fly. He was the boy who had awakened his flame, learned to hover, and defied expectation with the guidance of a human maid. He had become a symbol of possibility, of what could be achieved when courage and intelligence were combined. And in the quiet of his chamber that night, Kael'thir reflected on what he had learned. Strength was not only power, it was patience, perseverance, trust, and the wisdom to follow guidance when it led to a path beyond what anyone thought possible. With Arya at his side, he had begun to rise not only physically, but in spirit. The Sky Palace, once a place of confinement, had become a place of awakening. The boy who had never walked, who had never flown, was learning not only to move, but to soar. And the human who had defied every expectation was proving that even the smallest and seemingly weakest could awaken greatness in a being destined to rule an empire. The next morning, the palace was unusually quiet. Kael'thir woke early, his body still aching slightly from the previous day's exertions, but his mind was sharper and more focused than ever. Arya had prepared the chamber with the same care she had shown since the beginning of his training. Every mat, every device, every tool had a purpose, and every day brought him closer to the strength he had long believed was impossible. "Today," Arya said, her voice calm and steady, "we focus on coordination, not just flight, but controlled flight. You will need this if you are ever to face those who doubt your strength." Kael'thir nodded, stretching his wings carefully. They felt different now, responsive, alive, ready to obey his commands. For the first time, he did not fear failure. Every small movement of the past weeks had taught him to trust his body, to listen to its signals, and to act with intention. They began with hovering exercises, gradually increasing altitude. Kael'thir felt the thrill of being off the ground, the wind brushing against his scales, and the warmth of his internal flame strengthening with each controlled breath. Arya adjusted the harmonic devices, guiding his energy with precise frequencies that harmonized with his flame. Hours passed. Kael'thir lifted higher, extended his wings fully, and maintained balance in midair. His tail and claws moved with coordination he had never known, and the glow of his flame illuminated the chamber, casting reflections across the crystal walls. "You are ready," Arya said finally, stepping back. "Now we prepare for what may come. Others will not accept your rise without challenge. You must learn to defend yourself while maintaining control." Kael'thir understood immediately. The rival faction of dragons, threatened by his progress, would not allow him to ascend without resistance. He was no longer the boy who could not walk or fly. He was becoming a symbol of hope and possibility. And with that recognition came danger. Later that day, the warning arrived. The rival dragons had begun their assault. Their leader, a massive dragon named Rysor, had gathered a group of powerful followers to confront Kael'thir directly. They entered the palace silently, intending to capture or subdue the prince before he could fully awaken his abilities. Arya and Kelthir sensed the danger immediately. They moved to a high chamber overlooking the palace gardens. Kelthir's wings stretched instinctively, the glow of his flame reflecting off the polished walls. Arya had prepared a plan, using her knowledge of human tactics and the palace layout to give them an advantage. "Remember," she said softly, "strength is not just power. It is control, strategy, and courage. Trust yourself. Trust your flame." The first of the rival dragons arrived, striking with impressive speed. Kelthir lifted into the air, hovering just above the floor, and responded with controlled bursts of flame. The attacks were precise, enough to disarm without harming, and the intruders were momentarily taken aback. Arya moved swiftly, directing Kelthir to positions that gave him leverage and prevented the attackers from surrounding him. Her strategies, though unfamiliar to the dragons, proved effective. Kelthir adapted quickly, dodging attacks, maintaining balance, and using his wings and tail with growing skill. One by one, the rival dragons were forced to retreat, unable to predict his movements or counter the combination of human ingenuity and draconian power. Kelthir's flame flared brighter with each successful maneuver, his confidence soaring higher than his altitude. Rysor, the leader, was the last to confront him. Massive and intimidating, he circled Kelthir, testing his resolve. The prince steadied himself, wings fully extended, flame glowing in perfect harmony. He did not strike recklessly. Instead, he waited, observing Rysor's patterns, and used calculated bursts of flame to control the battlefield. Arya's voice guided him, calm and precise. "Now, Kelthir, show them what you are capable of. Not to destroy, but to demonstrate your strength." With a powerful flap of his wings, Kelthir lifted higher, the wind carrying him with grace. He released a controlled surge of flame that illuminated the chamber, forcing Rysor to pause. The leader realized then that the boy who had never walked or flown was no longer to be underestimated. Rysor retreated, signaling his followers to withdraw. The chamber was quiet once more, the glow of Kelthir's flame dimming to a steady, controlled burn. He hovered in place, breathing deeply, exhilaration and relief coursing through him. He had faced his first real challenge and emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through skill, focus, and the guidance of the human who had never doubted him. The Emperor arrived soon after, accompanied by several senior advisors. They witnessed the aftermath. Kelthir standing tall, wings extended, flame steady, eyes shining with determination. For the first time, the Emperor saw not a fragile son, but a dragon who had learned to rise through courage, patience, and intelligence. "You have done well," the Emperor said, his voice deep and resonant. "I see now that strength is not only born in the body but in the mind and spirit. You have proven that even the smallest, most unexpected allies can awaken greatness." Arya, standing beside Kelthir, bowed respectfully. The Emperor's acknowledgement was subtle, yet it carried immense weight. "Human," he said, "you have earned a place here, not merely as a servant, but as a guide and advisor. Your wisdom and courage have changed what we believed possible." The palace staff, who had once whispered doubts, now looked on in awe. Kelthir's success was no longer a private achievement. It was a statement to the entire empire. Dragons, young and old, marveled at the boy who had never walked or flown, now mastering his abilities with precision and grace, guided by the human who had dared to believe in him. That evening, Kelthir and Arya stood on a high balcony overlooking the city. The twin suns had set, casting a soft glow across the crystal towers and starships in orbit. The prince lifted into the air, hovering gracefully, wings extended fully. His flame glowed softly, illuminating the balcony with a warm light. I never thought I could do this, Kelthir said quietly, his voice filled with awe. I never believed it was possible, Arya smiled. You had the strength all along. You only needed to trust yourself and allow guidance to awaken it. You have risen because you were willing to try. That is something no one can take from you. Kelthir hovered higher, then descended beside her, landing softly. He looked down at the palace below, and for the first time, he saw it not as a place of confinement, but as a kingdom of possibility. His body had learned to walk, his wings to lift him into the air, and his flame to respond to his will. He was no longer defined by limitations, but by potential. Arya placed a hand gently on his arm. This is only the beginning, Kelthir. Your journey has only just begun. There will be challenges, enemies, and doubts. But you now have the knowledge, the courage, and the guidance to rise above them all. The prince looked at her, a smile breaking across his face for the first time in years. I was born with wings, but you taught me how to rise. And in that moment, the Sky Palace itself seemed to acknowledge the transformation. The towers reflected the light of his flame. The wind whispered through the corridors, and the empire that had once doubted him now bore witness to a miracle. A human had shown a dragon how to awaken his strength, proving that courage, intelligence, and determination could surpass even the most rigid expectations of lineage and tradition. The night passed peacefully. Kelthir trained, hovered, and practiced coordinated flight, each movement more confident than the last. Arya remained by his side, guiding, observing, and adjusting. Together, they had achieved what many thought impossible. Together, they had shown the Empire that greatness could come from the most unexpected places. By dawn, Kelthir rose higher than ever before, wings fully extended, flame bright and steady. He looked down at the palace, at Arya, at the world beyond, and felt an unshakable sense of purpose. He was no longer the boy who could not walk or fly. He was a dragon awakened, a prince transformed, a symbol of possibility and hope. The human who had believed in him watched proudly. She had done what no one else could. Awaken a boy, a prince, and a dragon, showing that even in a world of immense power, intelligence, patience, and courage could achieve the impossible. The Empire would remember this day. Not for the battles fought, not for the flames burned, but for the miracle that had occurred, proof that humanity, small and seemingly fragile, could ignite greatness in even the most powerful beings. Kelthir took a final glide above the balcony. The wind rushing beneath his wings, flame steady, heart racing. He returned beside Arya and said softly, I am ready for whatever comes next, because I know. I will not rise alone. And the Empire watched in awe, as a dragon, guided by a human, soared higher than anyone had ever imagined, embodying the limitless potential of courage, determination, and belief.